that cases of sexual violence are on the rise given what we have witnessed recently. And the question that we're asking you today is, why are we seeing a rise in cases of sexual violence? What is the driving force behind it? Is it a morality issue, or what exactly is happening? So we want to find out, plus many other questions that we'll be answering in today's discussion. So like we said, if you want to be part of the conversation, feel free to do so. You can either, get to us via our socials. That is at NTV Kenya, at Lubembe_Winnie, or better yet, you want to call in, either share your experience with sexual violence, or you also want to contribute to the same, feel free to do so. The numbers will be down on your screen in just a moment. But let me introduce my guest for the day. So on my immediate left, I have Maureen Kawira, who's a program manager at Usikimwe. Good morning, Maureen. Thank you very much, for making time for us this morning. And we also have Leah Gatuma, who is a family therapist. Good morning, Leah.
Good morning.
Good to see you this morning. And we also have Elizabeth Atwani Iluku, who is a social worker. It's very good to see you this morning, Elizabeth. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
All right, all of you looking beautiful this morning. Let's just start with the basics, because it's just sad that in this day and age, we're still talking about cases of sexual violence. And of course, just recently in the country, again, we've witnessed that number. Like every single day you watch the news, there's a case of sexual violence. And the question is, why? Why are we seeing an increase of the same? But let me begin with you, Leah. In terms of sexual violence, there's a very thin line, and especially when it comes to marriages, as far as sexual violence is concerned. So when we say someone has been sexually violated, what exactly does that cover?
Well, we might think that we are talking about the actual penetration. But it's much bigger than
Beyond that, okay.
Because it even starts with verbal, where you demean somebody. It goes all the way to just your victim becomes somebody who is powerless. So there's a way in which you will treat them, and there's a way in which you will work with them or talk with them that makes them feel like you're, first and foremost, initially it feels like you're not harmful, you who is the abuser. All right. And so the way they approach you looks like it's not going to end badly. All right. And so there's a way abusers woo their victims and make them feel like it's no big deal and it's not bad. But how somebody treats you, how somebody talks to you, the way they touch you, and you are not ready for it, they are not allowing you to consent, all that encompasses violence. So even within marriage, where somebody, a couple is not, probably they are not in good terms, and the lady is not ready for it, the man then ought to be respectful. But a lot of times people feel, or men feel, and I'm using the word men because it's the majority, but I know that there's also vice versa.
Oh yes, absolutely.
The man feels he's right, and so there is a way they will, the man will put it to the woman that it's my right, you ought to be serving me, and so on, so that at the end of the day, even the woman begins to feel, probably I'm the one who has a problem. Why am I not serving my husband? Why am I not doing what I ought to do? And so by the end of the day, and unfortunately, when it comes to marriage, then these incidences are not reported because it's expected this is a normal thing. So if your husband abuses you or beats you up in looking for sex, it's not, you're going to be shamed if you try and report that.
That's true. Yeah. That's true. And first, we'll focus more in depth in terms of the different forms of sexual violence. Yeah. Of course, I like the fact that you also bring up the aspect of marriage, and it's my right, and if you deny me my right, I can actually go to court and sue you for the same. So it's a very, very thin line, right? But when you say, when someone talks to you in a way that you're not okay with, right? There was a discussion on social media where people were saying, excuse me, people have become too sensitive, or I did not mean it like that. Me, I was just joking, but then again, you took it seriously, right? So how far can someone go as far as making, for example, sexual comments that maybe someone is not happy about? Do you want to take that?
Okay. When someone makes a comment, you know, it might be hurtful to someone, and it is important for there to be a communication, especially when it comes to family setting. It is important that both partners open up and speak about it.
All
And
right.
violence is not an option.
It really isn't. It really
Yeah.
isn't, and we should not in any shape, way, or form be silent about it. You know, given what Leah is talking about, an aspect of then how do you know that this has crossed the border and has become violence? But Leah, very quickly before I come back to Maureen, in terms of social media, where it's very easy for people to just say whatever, you know, because at the end of the day, I am behind the keyboard. You will not get access to me. But at what point does it cross the line from just being a joke to, no, you cannot talk about certain things or certain genders in a certain way?
Yeah, no, it's important for people to remain respectful to one another. And there are certain comments that people make and they know within themselves that this is very insensitive and very mean. And they go ahead and do it. And I want to say here at this point that a lot of times people who delve into mean conversations on social media, are themselves hurting. Probably they are victims of abuse themselves. They don't know anything better to do. Probably they grew up being called names, they grew up being demeaned and put down. And so they only know how to demean and put others down. And that helps them gain power because they, for a long time, grew up feeling very powerless, you know, because of the way the abusers used to treat them, whether it could be a parent or a neighbor or whoever it is. Unfortunately, when it comes to children, a lot of abusers happen to be people who are known to them. It could be a neighbor or a relative. So they grew up hearing words that are harsh and mean, and it becomes a part of them, and it becomes a pattern, so that they become powerless. So by the time they are adults, because they probably have told themselves, no one will ever abuse me, no one will ever treat me like that, they are looking to gain power by being abusive now to other people. Yeah, and hurting other people. And because they succeed in that, they will continue to do so.
Okay, hurt people,
yes,
as they always say.
Yeah.
All right, so for Maureen, again, of course, you see these cases, right? What is that one big reason why this is happening? And of course, not only in the country, but even across the border.
We can say that this is something that is happening now
Because
it's been there. We're just now talking about it. We're just now reporting. Because even in a room of, let's say, 50 women, ask them, how many of you have ever been violated when under the age of 18 and you never told anyone?
Okay.
Probably 80% of them will say that.
They have been violated, yeah.
Yeah. What was the first, because I remember I did a poll last week and I asked, the first time you were catcalled as a girl, how old were you? You'll be shocked. 9, 10.
True. Even
We've
younger
been socialized to think because I am a woman and because I have breasts, I have hips, it's okay for people to catcall me. It means I am appealing. It means I am attractive. You see? And it demeans the idea of consent.
Okay.
Because explicit consent, and the best analogy people use is the phone. Because people are very protective of their phone.
Oh, yes. You
They'll
can't just
be like, I did not give you permission to go through.
Phone.
Same thing. I did not give you permission to touch me, to talk to me like that. You know, because your right stops where my freedom starts.
Okay.
If your right is infringing on my freedom, then it means you're abusing me. Be it verbally, be it even an unwanted look, an uninvited look.
Okay.
Because if you look at me in a certain way and I don't respond, then stop. Because that's why you start being creepy and you start being abusive. Yeah, there's a place where the line is drawn.
Okay.
That said, with the COVID pandemic, kids were home. I tell people kids is a safe place and a safe space for so many children. Because as Leah said, when kids are home, they interact with relatives, they interact with neighbors, they interact with guys at the church, you see. So you being a parent, the best way for you also to know if this happened is to ask. Because majority of the survivors that we meet, we ask them, why didn't you not report? Why didn't you talk about it if it happened 10 years ago? And they say, no one asked me.
Okay.
Because it's very hard for a child to tell on an adult.
Just come out and say.
To even just report an adult. Because they're like, you're the adult, you should know what is right and wrong. You teach me in church, you teach me at home, you teach me in class. And then, so you understand, if you're doing this, it means then it's right. Even if I'm feeling uncomfortable, then it's right.
Okay. They don't know. They don't know. And, okay, there's usually a very big, people scared to talk about, for example, sex, you know, to talk about, you cannot touch me here, you cannot, I mean, and especially when it comes to the children, the biggest question is usually, at what point do you introduce sexual education to a child? Because most parents will tell you, me, I was never taught these things, you know, I just grew up, and one way or the other, I found information on the same, right? So at what point, at what age should you start talking to children about, first of all, just understanding your body? Yeah.
The same way we teach anatomy.
Okay.
You know, we even have songs for this. These are your eyes, these are your ears, this is your nose. First teach anatomy. And then you tell them no one should touch these parts. Because the whole idea of talking about sex has been sexualized in such a way, unafunza mtoto tabia mbaya.
That's true.
You see?
True.
But it's just basic anatomy. The same we tell them, don't run into the road, you'll get hit. You know, teach them as part of socializing them. You know, and if someone tries to do this, come and tell mommy.
Okay.
Go and tell your class teacher. Go and tell this other person. If they don't listen, tell someone else.
Okay.
Because what happens to children is, even if they report to their parents who don't believe the children. The parents who don't take them seriously. The parents who even themselves are survivors of GBV at home. So this one is like, how do I even start handling this case?
That's true.
You see? So it's easier as a human being to flight rather than fight. You know.
Okay, I hear you.
So you can imagine if you as an adult can't address it aggressively. What about this child who is powerless? Who can't, even if they think of, let me run away from home, where do I even start from?
Yeah.
You know, who do I tell? And it's a good thing that we're having these conversations and we're teaching the children and telling them the helpline numbers for children, like 116. Even for adults, we have a call center at Usikimye. There's a national call center. So there is access to help.
Okay, help is everywhere. Just muster the courage to talk, right?
Yeah.
And there's also an aspect of trust, and I'd want Elizabeth to just handle this, where, do we know what perpetrators look like? Because there's usually like this picture. When you think about a perpetrator, there's usually a picture that most people have. But then again, when you get to the ground, you find that it's a totally different pictures. So the question is, do we know who they are? Do we know what they look? Do they have like a certain characteristic that maybe we should look at or should look out for?
It's very difficult to tell who the perpetrator is. Okay. It could be anyone. It could be a neighbor, a dad, a parent, a mom, it could be an uncle. A perpetrator is anyone. Okay. So it is very difficult to say this is the perpetrator. Like people seated in a room, you can't just point out that this is a perpetrator.
True.
And unless someone comes out reporting that they were perpetrated against.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We can't judge people based on face value.
No.
And say this is the perpetrator.
No.
Because I remember when we were young, there were some times where you would look at someone and think, we are a come to buy, and then you run away from that person, only to realize that they're actually really good people.
Yes.
So you really can't judge someone on face value. All right. So Leah, then, what are some of these forms of GBV? I know we've mentioned here and there, but when it comes to sexual violence, what are some of the forms for the same, so that people know that, like, you know, Maureen just said, if you look at me in a certain way, that is a form of sexual violence, right? So what are some of these other forms?
Yeah, before I answer that, I also want to say that a perpetrator or an abuser can be somebody who is extra nice and extra kind, very helpful in society. They are known by the society as these people who are very good and who contribute to the welfare of the society.
Okay. They have some form
of
respect.
And a lot of times they do that to even disguise who they really are. So it could be your pastor, it could be your Sunday school teacher. I happen to work, I'm a clergy and I happen to work in a church. And it could be somebody who is in that environment that is supposed to be safe. It could be somebody who is a CEO somewhere, you know. It could be, so I like what she said, you can't tell by looking at somebody. And a lot of times then these people will approach you with kindness and goodness and with gifts. so that you could never suspect them. They are usually very patient. They can stalk you for 2 good years, just gaining your trust. And I'm talking about gaining trust not just for children, but even for adults
as well.
So that at the end of the day, this person does not look harmful in any way. But let me tell you, if you get to that space that is private and, you know, not safe for that matter, because probably there's nobody who can get, you can get help from, is when you will see their true colors. So just to say then that you can't tell.
You can't tell.
Yeah. And what I'd like to say is exactly what she had said, that for as long as it's something that is uncomfortable, whether it is something that is done to you or said to you, then that passes for abuse. So even a look. Yeah, and it's very unfortunate then for children, they are not able to tell whether that look is supposed to be unsafe or that touch is supposed to be unsafe, and who should I tell? So a lot of times by the time they are realizing, I really don't like this, already step number 2 and 3 have happened.
That's true.
And already they are feeling powerless, or they've already been threatened. By step 3 and 4, they now are being threatened. The
aggression is too, okay.
Yeah, that if you try and say what's going on here. So initially it's introduced as something nice. This is a little game, you know, using words that are not threatening. These are a little game. It's gonna feel nice. If you feel uncomfortable, don't worry. It eventually will feel good. So by the time they are now beginning to say, this sucks, I don't like it, I'm feeling funny, they already now are being threatened. You try and do this, I'll kill your whole family. If you try and do this, I'll kill you. And so they learn to keep quiet because they're looking to protect their mommy or their daddy, whoever it is that they love so much. They learn to keep quiet because they don't want to die themselves. So it could be words, it could be things that are done to you, it could be non-penetrative. Somebody touches you. By the way, a lot of violence, especially sexual violence, is just touch. And people have tried to report that, you know, my child is reporting, my cousin touched me this way, and of course they try and report. And then when you report, it was non-penetrative, you're not hurt physically, and they're like, there's no evidence. And it's dropped. And this child will be traumatized for life because they've been denied their freedom, they've been denied their truth, you know, and they begin to think to themselves, maybe it's okay.
Maybe it's okay.
Yeah, maybe it's normal. Yeah, so even a touch, even a word that is seductive, I mean, it's very, very disrespectful.
Okay. And you know, for women or for a woman, for a girl, sometimes it might deem quote unquote easier to tell that, yeah, the way you're looking at me or the way you touched me or the way, you know, you did this or whatever you said to me, I didn't like it or it felt uncomfortable. But what about, for example, a case of a boy or even a man? Because most of the time when you talk about sexual violence, of course, the women are mostly affected, so it's mostly geared towards the women, right? But what does it look like when a man is sexually violated or a boy? What does that look like?
Let me start by saying that a lot of times people who are abused are already probably going through some sort of trauma.
Okay.
So that by the time this abuser is approaching you, you are desperate for love, you are desperate for affirmation, and so on. So that by the time this person is winking at you or doing this or that, that's uncomfortable, you almost feel like, maybe this person likes me, maybe they notice me. So your first reaction is not, that's abusive. Your first reaction is, maybe if I respond positively and accept their gestures, they love me and they'll accept me.
Okay.
And so I also want to say that for boys, boys grow up knowing or being taught to man up and to feel, you know, that they are the ones that are in charge. And so when things happen to them, so that they can continue to feel like they're the ones who are in charge, they can't show that it's hurtful and the other person therefore is in charge. They want to show like, actually, I really didn't mind. Yeah. Probably, actually, you read me right.
Yes.
And so
it's what I was thinking.
Yes, that's what I was thinking. Right. So they will hardly, it will be hard for them to now start saying that this is wrong and you don't do that to me. they're likely to now be positive and, you know, welcoming to the abuser,
Okay.
which is very, very unfortunate. So girls can abuse boys. Yeah, girls
That's
can
true.
abuse boys. They can be forceful towards boys, and boys will feel almost, you know, like I'll show weakness if I try and like protest.
Is it then difficult for them to know what's uncomfortable, what they don't like? Because what you're saying is they've been brought up knowing that you're supposed to be in charge, you're supposed to be the man. So it's like, you know, and then maybe a case of violence escalates to maybe more of physical. And then this person is like, but it's them who started this whole thing, you know? So it's like the perpetrator sort of becomes the victim, right? So in such a case then, what's gonna happen, Maureen?
Yeah, before I answer that, I like what Leah said. And something we also need to notice is there's always a power dynamic when it comes to sexual violence.
Yes.
The same way we're talking about girls is the same way we should talk about boys. Because even with boys, most of them, their first sexual encounter was with an older woman, most probably with an adult woman, and that still counts as sexual violence.
True.
You know, and we have this narrative, and we grow up. I actually grew up with this narrative that a man is more appealing with the more sexual conquest that they have. You know, like you're the cool boy if you have many girlfriends, if you have an older girlfriend in campus and you're in high school, like guys look at you and say, hey, this guy is,
you're on another level.
Undio bazoo kwa mtaa, because this is, but that's the thing. This might actually be a survivor of violence, but because they want to maintain that street name and that street brand, they're like, oh, well, if I get to have other girls my age because of having this older woman who approached me, who abused me, then well and good, you see. So we also have to break that narrative of the more girlfriends you have, the more manly you are also.
Yes.
It's
like they like me, they just follow me. I'm pretty sure you've had a lot of men say that.
But there's also
they just
the
follow
idea
me.
of women making these same comments that we talk about men, women make them. True. We see them on Facebook. Someone posts their son and they're like, oh, my boyfriend, my husband, oh, I have a daughter for him. And the boy is 3.
Yes. Like they don't know nothing yet.
You know,
allow them to be a child.
The same way we sexualize girls is the same way we are doing it now. You know, or when a boy grows and you go visit and you've not seen this boy for a long time, you're like, this one is now old enough to have a wife. You know, or this girl now is old enough to have kids. You know, those small statements. Because the thing with kids, and I know Leah can talk about this because I'm also a psychologist, but the thing with kids is they're a blank slate. So everything you put in it is recorded. And to them, this is the norm. This is normal. So at this age, and even it's when you tell kids, when your child is enrolling as a teenager, and you tell them, unaona umekuwa mwanamke, you know, those things that you tell her, always remind them that they're children.
Yes.
And they're under your care, you know. And you are the first source of information, and you're the first source of safety for them.
Okay.
Always remind them that.
All right.
Because then it becomes easy for them to come and tell you, Daddy, that woman, that neighbor, is looking at me funny. I know I'm a boy and I'm supposed to, but... And then you don't brush them off, or you don't tell them, if women want you, that's a good thing. No. You tell you go and now address it as a parent. Or if your son comes and tells you, I don't like this new house girl. I don't like this new house help we have. You know, because talk to the men. Most of them,
they'll tell you
their first sexual encounters were with house helps or with aunties or with cousins, older cousins. It's the same, the risk is the same.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And I want Elizabeth to take that aspect of sometimes the perpetrator might, turn out to be or is it the victim turn out to be the perpetrator? You know, it could be could go both ways. And of course, having interacted with these people, I'm pretty sure you've had someone who told you, yeah, but she started it, or but he started it. Why are they complaining? You know, and yet they're the one who somewhat, quote unquote, invited me. So what are some of those things that maybe the victims might do that somewhat pulls the perpetrator towards that direction?
Okay. Yes, we've handled so many cases that start in that manner. Like people meet in Facebook, and maybe after chatting for some time, it could be this girl inviting the man to just have a drink. Okay. Then this man already thinks, oh, this is about sex.
Sharing gearbox.
Yeah, sharing gearbox. So, and at some point they even realize, this girl, the way she's behaving, is like ni kama sitampata vizuri.
Okay.
And then there's so many cases of sexual violence that happened because a man spiked a woman's drink, and they end up sexually violating them because maybe at some point they realized maybe she just invited me for that drink, and she really didn't mean that we should have sex. They end up spiking their drinks, then just have it easy. So it is common, and it's something that is very unfortunate that and it is the other, it happens either way.
Okay. Oh, yes.
Women also do the same thing. Yeah, they meet a guy and then they can end up violating them sexually, which is very unfortunate.
It's unfortunate. And also, for example, let's just come back to a family setup where a girl, maybe a boy, and we've had people say, yeah, but you see, you dress your child this way and there's a man, or there's the older brother, or there's an older cousin in the house. What do you expect? It's like, it's your fault for having this, first of all, girl in the home, and then dressing them in a certain way. And my question is, boundaries, you know, like what happens there? Can't this girl or can't this boy just be kids, number one? Just let them be. And not really think about, oh, so the fact that you can see, you know, maybe a certain body part, even if they're well dressed, and you start thinking, you know, those thoughts. So where does boundary then come in? Leah, very quickly before we go on a break.
I want to say that sometimes we don't think that when parents show their nudity or introduce nudity to children, that's violence in and of itself.
All right.
But a lot of times the family environment is a very abusive environment. When parents choose to have sex in front of their children, probably you are living in one room, and you assume that this 3-year-old boy or 4-year-old boy is too small, does not understand. We have had stories, I'm telling you, I work with children. We have had stories of children telling us, Daddy always beats mommy and sleeps on mommy fighting her, like wrestling. What is that?
Okay.
It means they saw.
They see,
and when parents assume that this child is too small to understand, by the time this child grows up and understands, by the way, this becomes a very traumatic kind of a thing.
That's true.
For this child as they're growing up. So I'd say there needs to be boundaries for parents. Please don't have sex in front of your children. Please don't be inappropriate with each other in front of your children. In terms of even abusive conversations and all that. Don't abuse your child. Don't touch your child inappropriately, because how will you teach this child to not to know the wrong touch if you yourself you're touching them abusively? It looks like it is playful, but it needs to not happen. Why? So that you can teach your child that out there, when somebody does this to you, it is not appropriate. So start with respect within the home. Respect one another within the home in terms of what you do. Sometimes parents or a house girl will be watching porn, and their child comes and they don't bother to stop it. And the child sits there because they are so engrossed in what they are doing. They don't notice that this child is seated. Yeah, and they continually do that. That is abuse for that child, and it needs to stop. So there needs to be boundaries in terms of what we allow our children to watch, what we allow, what we expose our children to. There needs to be boundary from the home setup, including abusive language. Like when parents, I had a child telling me that if I get myself dirty, my mom will shout at me. Parent, why would you shout at your child when they get that? What are they supposed to do?
They're children.
Like there are things that are they are unacceptable. Please, parents, just be reasonable.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, with your
with the children.
Because the child will grow up with a lot of low self-esteem because of small things like those,
shouting,
so that they will never recognize unsafe things.
That's true.
Yeah.
All right, let's take a quick. Can you answer after the break? Because we need to go on a break right now. But let's just take a look at the feedback, what you had to say as far as the question that we asked you today, and that is, why are there increased cases of sexual violence? And let's take a look at what some of you had to say. At Makueni Finest says, Love Elisha, nowadays it's what you put on the table. All right, okay. And then someone else says, this is Nikki Shimei, says, neglected male figure, wrong relationship advice, especially to female. Okay. And then someone else says, this is at David Munyoto says, forced equality and equity in society, unless that card is settled, let's pray. All right, question of power. Okay. And then at Newman Annie says, sexualizing our society in the name of sexual revolution has made it difficult for most men to control their sexual appetite. Okay. And then at Juventine Opuru says, harsh economy imposed by the government. All right. And then someone else says, this is Simon K. Prop 2K, says, misconduct, that's putting on exposing clothing, increased drug abuse, failure of the community in installing morals to the new generation, and finally, modernization, that's increased abuse or misuse of social media. And someone else says, this is at Obi Baraka, says, people are consuming explicit information, thus their conscience is corrupted. Okay. And then Hassan Mustafa says, commitment and faithfulness are lacking in many relationships. All right, so much for us to go through as far as the topic of conversation, and that is on sexual violence. Of course, we'll be coming up and reacting to some of those feedback, so keep tweeting at NTV Kenya at Lubembe_Winnie. And like I said, if you want to call in live and chime into the conversation of the day, feel free to do so that at the end of the day we find solutions to some of those things, sexual violence being one of them. So stay with us. We'll see you after the short break.
Teach, inspire, and transform young minds to achieve their fullest potential. Welcome to our Raka campus and also the new campus along Eastern Bypass. Enroll today at Royal Brain School Executive Kindergarten and Primary School, a unique and executive school where the future begins.
Come August this year, Kenyans will head to the ballot to select their leaders for the next 5 years. Time has come for the electorate you're targeting to know you better. Articulate your thoughts, plans, and vision to the relevant audiences. Reach out to us through the contacts on your screen.
Hello? Kaimu. Uko?
Niko poa, natafuta Mariga juu.
Hata tuko naye hapa.
No, baby.
Maze, nikunoma. Nikufia. Wapi? Uko.
Fatu nyarire, yani hata una huruma kabisa. Yani umeketi chini hapo, ni simu unapiga simu, kasi ya simu ni kulia na hata huwezi kuihurumia jameni. Ingekuwa ni wewe unapigwa hivyo ungesikia namna gani? Ai bwana, yo hata una huruma hata kidogo. Ai haki bwana, you're making me go bananas bwana.
To get bananas, dial *812*806#. Skiza, non-nation.
like this. With a few sips of this. Get going with Go Fruit Juice. Now available in 500 ml on the Go packs.
Right, welcome back. Glad you're still with us. The show is Your World, and just in case you're tuning in right now, today our focus is on sexual gender-based violence. And of course, the question that we're asking you is, why are there increased cases of sexual violence? Once again, why are there increased cases of sexual violence? Keep tweeting at NTV Kenya at Lubembe_Winnie. But like I said, if you want to call in and ask your question, or maybe seek counsel, or just share your experience, then feel free to do so. The numbers are down on your screen. And just let's have this very, very important, very pertinent conversation that most of the time people shy away from. And of course, to help us with the conversation, we have Elizabeth Atwani Iluko, who is a social worker, Leah Gatuma, family therapist, as well as Maureen Kawira, program manager at Usikimye, all ladies. But again, like we're saying, it doesn't mean that it's only the ladies who are mostly affected by sexual violence, all right? Okay, so before we went on a break, of course, a lot of people had a lot to say as far as this, question that is, why are there increased cases of sexual violence? And Maureen, of course, you wanted to react to something,
Yes.
but I also want you to couple that with the person who said the economy is too harsh, and one way or the other is promoting cases of sexual violence.
I wanted to talk about the home setup and what you're talking about, how we have the home setup and how we dress our kids and all that. Because I think it's an African thing where if you are the one who's made it kidogo in your family, then your relatives come live with you. You have guys who are studying who come stay with you. And we talk about everything else apart from sex. We talk about when you're in this house, you don't take drugs. When you're in my house, you don't come late. When you're in my house, you do chores. You also don't say, when you're in my house, you do not violate my children.
That's true.
Because one, it is illegal. And two, if you try, I will make sure you're locked up. Because even when these cases are reported, it becomes this person belongs to the family. Ni mtu wa familia. You go talk about it. But it is sexual violence. There are cases of sexual violence that don't make it to court because the evidence is there, it's collected, the case has been taken to the police station, but then the mother or the parents of this child are approached and they're told, this boy is our cousin.
That's true.
This is Nani's son.
Yeah, you do not want to shame the family.
You're breaking and you're shaming the family. That also needs to be there. When you talk about boundaries, there are things we need to talk about. And if you don't trust someone in your house, ask them to leave.
Okay.
The minute you just feel this is uncomfortable. And can we normalize helping people from their own homes? Yeah.
Okay.
Your home is not open to everyone. I'm not saying don't help. But if you're feeling uncomfortable, if you're feeling I may not have the strength in me to deal with such a thing, help them from a distance.
Okay.
And if you see the way they're socialized is not comfortable with you and you're trying to teach them and they're not learning, if they're watching pornography, as Leah was saying, if they're making certain statements and they're making certain comments, because kids learn from everyone around them.
Oh, absolutely.
They may not directly violate your child, but they might turn your child into an abuser. Because that is how they learn. What movies, what music, what are they, then make your home a safe space for your children. I always tell people, if your child is not safe at home, where will they be safe?
That's true.
If in that place where they call home, because you find kids walking around at 7, at 8, they don't want to go home. Ask yourself why. Why is this child not at home? What is happening in that home that they'd rather play outside until 8
dark
and not come home? So also have that boundary and that strict rule in your home. That this is how my house runs. No sexual, no pornography, no sexual statements, no body shaming. People start telling a child, you're fat. You need to work out. This child will grow with that feeling. And for me, it's a personal experience because I was always a heavy child. And I remember on a visiting day, I think a relative who not seen me for long came and said, ah, umekuwa mama. And I was in class 8. Because in my family, we are big-bodied.
Wow.
You know,
what?
You know, such a statement.
Yeah.
I was in class 8 until date. I have never forgotten.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. But that's also the essence of therapy. The things that you went through as a child that you might not know are traumatic. Just investigate why you're so uncomfortable with your own body. Because even as women, you can't even stand in front of a mirror naked.
That's true. Or alternatively, I mean, I've heard stories of some women who would tell you, I was so insecure about my body for a very long time that I met this one person who told me that I look really good. And I trusted that person instantly, and they turned out to be an abuser, right?
Yeah.
Man. Okay,
So
all
we
right.
also
Be
need to
careful,
teach
right?
our
Be careful of
children.
the statements that you make.
Yes.
Okay.
But
for
talking
that,
about the economy,
yes.
sorry,
No,
talking
it's
about
okay.
the economy, we have something called sex for pads. If you have not been in a situation where you can't afford sanitary towels for yourself or for your child, then you might not really understand what poverty is. When this girl, because we are at this stage where you're saying girls are spoiled, you know, girls are going after older men. And for them, it might be basic need as a sanitary towel. Because it is a hygiene product. And we also need to have the conversation, and you need to have the conversation here. Why condoms are free and we need to buy pads? We also need to have that conversation. Because also the shame that comes with periods. That when you're in a supermarket and you're buying pads and it's wrapped like like drugs, like mihadarati. You can't even walk with it from a shop.
Everybody's staring at your cart like,
you know,
you're
like
pads.
You're on your menses, you know.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
We also need to teach our children that this is normal. Go ask your father for money for pads.
That's true.
Let him know this is part of the things he buys. Yeah. It's the same way you go and ask for toothpaste.
Okay.
So can we also look at the economy and see these are things that are making kids vulnerable in the community?
Yeah, and not only kids, like even older women, right? I mean, we usually hear case of, like you said, women who sell, for example, fish. There's always that exchange, you know, I'll give you this if you, you know, give this in return. All right, but then again, I like what you said, an aspect of there's a lot of stigma and shame, and especially when it comes to addressing these cases. And I'd want Elizabeth to take this, so for those people who are stigmatizing or shaming people who've gone through cases of sexual violence, does it say much about them as compared to the victim who is trying to pass a point and say, hey, I am not okay, something is happening? And number two, we also have a case of persons who've gone through sexual violence feeling guilty. You know, maybe I'm the one who caused this. Maybe I did not dress too well. Maybe I looked at them, you know, in a certain way that they felt they can do whatever it is that they say. Can we just address this aspect of guilt, shame?
Okay. Before I address that, I wanted to add something on what Maureen said about the careless statements. They don't only come from relatives. Parents also give these statements so much at times because we have these cases of Romeo and Juliet. If you go deep into them, you realize it actually originated from the careless statements from the parents. The parents told you, maybe this girl made a mistake, She came home late, and the parents said, I do not want to see you in my house. So what does this child do?
Where do they go?
They go away. And who do they go away to? To that boy that they saw, who told them they are beautiful. One thing that the parent does not do, they do not affirm these children and tell them they are good enough and tell them they are beautiful. Now they hear that from outside, and that makes them feel like these people from outside are better, like they care about me. Not knowing these parents actually care a lot, but they just don't say.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And of course, that question of stigma and guilt, right, by the victim. Can you answer that after this caller? We have a caller on the line, Patricia from Nairobi. Good morning.
Hi, good morning.
Morning. Thank you very much for calling us this morning. Do you have a question, a comment? You want to chime into the conversation?
Oh, yeah. First, I'd like to say it's a very amazing conversation that we're talking about situational-based violence. Well, I agree to the part where we have sex portion, the one that one of the colleagues was saying, where somebody is hired for sex. There's also scenarios where people give sex for food and water, because of all these crises, like the food crisis. These are the things that contribute more to sexual and gender-based violence, Yeah, then again, I wanted to ask, can we talk more about sexual and gender-based violence associated with persons with disabilities? Because, they are more prone to sexual and gender-based violence. I'm not sure if you had touched that, please. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, Patricia, for chiming into the conversation of the day. And before we lose that, Leah, do you want to address that very quickly, and then I'll come back to Maureen, to Elizabeth on the aspect of guilt and shame. Sexual and gender-based violence amongst, persons living with disabilities, and probably just cap it all with there are people who are more at risk. We've talked about the children, women as well. Just cap it all with some groups that are more vulnerable to
there are people who are more vulnerable than others, for sure, when it comes to sexual violence. And I'll start by saying that the ones who are vulnerable are the ones who have been abused. Just so happens that you've been abused before, you're likely to be a victim and to continue being a victim, which is very sad. Then we have, of course, the children, the minors. We have women. We have the issue of economy, like it's been said. You are more vulnerable if you do not have the capital, to start business or even just food. Basics, yeah, basics, yeah. I have had cries of women saying, I don't have food for my children, and they prefer to stay in an abusive marriage, so that because they don't have, the money they have will never educate their children and feed them and house them. They need to be supplemented. And so they prefer to just stay in that abusive marriage. And besides the economy aspect, there's also the fact that the person who is abusing you will apologize and will play victim to, had you not shouted at me, had you not denied me sex, I was not going to be violent. I'm starved. That's why I had to hit you. So they also, the abuser plays victim. And, it causes confusion for the one who is the victim, because it's like, yeah, maybe there's something I've done. And you, even if you are called names, you never think twice, because you're like, I'm needy. I need the relationship. I need love. Who will ever accept me with children? Yes. Who will ever marry me? Who will ever meet my sexual needs if I leave this marriage? So those have become very vulnerable. But then even the ones who are abled differently are very vulnerable, because of the fact that they do not have the physical strength. They can't run away, for example. Probably they are needy, even they themselves are needy. Probably they've grown up with low self-esteem, thinking I'm not worthy, I can never be loved by anybody. And so if somebody shows up just showing some interest, especially sexual interest, you're like, finally somebody has noticed me. Because you see, they never think or feel beautiful or handsome. And so if somebody notices you, and it's very unfortunate that we tie sex to beauty. Yeah. That if somebody tells me I'm beautiful, it will be very difficult for me to now deny them sex. They're the ones who have noticed me. And so somebody will even make comments, you look very sexy. And for this disabled person, they're like, you mean the way I am? I am? So by the time you're inviting them, I mean, you won't even know as a disabled person that you're actually being abused politely. Okay. It looks like it's consent, but once this person goes, because they really were just interested in sex, they'll never show that beauty or that concern they were initially showing with you. And you end up feeling so used and useless and worthless. And so that cycle then continues. If anybody else ever shows up, it's all you got. So you accept it. That's true. Yeah, so it's very unfortunate. Okay. All right. Do you want to contribute to this?
Yes, I wanted to add something to us providing structures and safety for children and even adults with intellectual disability. Because even for this person, most of these cases that we receive are after the survivor is pregnant. That's when they're like, somebody violated this child, and the child can't say who it is. Most of them are not even verbally expressive, you know, children with Down syndrome. And the reason why I'm saying structures is because the caregivers to these persons have to work, have to provide. So most of the time you either find, for them to prevent this from happening, these kids are locked up at home, or they're left at home alone, and then they become prey to abusers.
That's true.
So we also have to create structures and support systems and support groups for persons living with intellectual disability, physical disability, for them not to be.
Okay, and even the older persons.
Yeah.
I mean, we've had so many cases of, you know, older persons either being raped, being sodomized, and you're thinking, what happened to morality? You know, like what happened to just looking at this person and just wanting to take care of them, and not because you want anything, you know, out after this person. So again, just going back to, you know, what we were saying earlier on, that is the aspect of morality, right? All right, so keep calling. The numbers are down on your screen, or of course, keep interacting with us on our socials as far as the conversation. And remember, what we're asking you today is, why is there an increase in cases of sexual violence? We'll be looking at more of your feedback as we continue with the show, but also there's a question of fine. So the perpetrator, there's a reason why they're doing this, and of course, you know, Leah talked about it earlier on. But Elizabeth, so can we take a look at then how this act could be, you know, verbal, could be physical, affects the victim, either in the short term or in long term? And of course, having interacted with them, what does it look like?
Okay, we had initially spoken about the guilt, and shame. So sexual violence is shameful to anybody, especially the adults, because they understand that they need to consent to have it. Now, if it's done to them, no, it's by coercion, it's by force, it's shameful. So sometimes they maybe evaluate, where was I when this thing happened to me? Maybe I could not have been there. It could not have happened to me. If I did not leave my home to go maybe look for this job, this guy that is supposed to give me that job opportunity will not have violated me. And it takes time to bring them back to realization that they are actually not part of the guilt. They are actually, they were in their normal like routine. They were in their normal job-seeking routine when this thing happened to them. So it is true that they face this guilt, and whenever anybody hears about them, especially those who do not understand what these people go through, they victimize them.
That's true.
That's true. That is very, very shameful.
Okay. All right. And also, there's also an aspect of, yes, shame within, guilt within, but also, like you said, the society also, you know, falls you for the same. You know, why are you dressed like that? Why did you do this? Why did you do that? Why did you look at me like that? I would not have made an advancement if you did not look at me, you know, in that case. So before we talk about the, you know, impact of the same, let's answer a caller on the line. Good morning.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Fine, thank you.
Thank you very much for calling us this morning. Daniel, of course, all the way from Mombasa. Do you have a question or do you want to chime in?
I want just to comment on the program.
All right.
Yeah, very, very important topic. And an issue that is really traumatizing the Kenyan society and without much empathy from the concerned. Now, what I want to say, one is correct the erroneous narrative. That whenever we talk about gender-based violence, it's like we are talking about violence against women or the girl child. I come from a community, specifically Kisi community, where even from my own village, I know of incidences where very many men are being battered left and right by their wives. More so women now, you know, there's a wrong narrative that men are physically stronger than women. Maybe it used to happen, but now that men are taking charge for breakfast, they have no even strength and they're being beaten left and right. But culturally, they don't admit that they are being beaten. my own uncle was really beaten and broken the hand, and when we asked him, he said, no, I took changa, I fell down, only to come and learn that he was beaten by a stool by my aunt, and was admitted for 4 months. Then secondly, I think also the church and the judicial system as such is contributing, because like whenever there is a marriage is not working, and maybe the couples want to say to part ways, it makes it even impossible, especially for Christians, to divorce. And because you cannot get that divorce now, you say, let me stay. And in the process, you have seen the couples killing each other, even the children. If they were like Muslims, where there's a problem, it is a bit easier to separate. Then I think that could a bit help. But the Christian doctrine we have, like divorce, is impossible. It's almost impossible. And whenever it works, then it takes too long. The process is too long. And in the process, before it's affected, then something can happen. And lastly, the hard economic times is also contributing. When you find that the woman is entirely depending on this man that is making violence on her day in, day out. And, you know, such men, you find they have very many children, about 6 children. Women, once they have been married, they are not acceptable back in their homes. Here is where she's suffering under the battering of the husband. She can't be accepted back at her home. She has children, and women have special love for children. So they say, because of the children, let me continue suffering. Maybe one day I'll get a remedy. Unfortunately, most of them, they end up dying even before they get that remedy.
That's true.
Yeah, thank you so much for the program.
All right. And of course, thank you very much for calling and also sharing your contribution, really, as far as this conversation is concerned. I really, really like the fact that, you know, really emphasizing that, guess what, it's not only a women's problem, but also affects the men. It's important for just men to come out and report these cases and not really be tied down by the fact that it is not culturally acceptable for a man to feel, you know, disempowered, really, at the end of the day. So thank you very much, Daniel, for that contribution. Of course, a lot of things that he's also brought about, you know, the judicial system, religious as well, together with the economy. Okay, so can we just quickly talk about then the, you know, the impact, the short-term and long-term impact, and then we'll also talk about an aspect of fine. So, example, I'm going through this, right? What is the first thing that I need to do, especially when it comes to reporting? Who do I talk to? Who do I report to? Can I trust these people? Will I be safe with these people? All right. So, Leah, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I want to say that sometimes when victims report, they meet, you know, people who will re-traumatize them because of their response. She had said earlier that you report to your mother, and either they don't believe you, and I'm telling you, when a child tells their mother, this happened to me, and the mother does not believe, it's very traumatic.
Yes.
Or you report to the police, say you are an adult, you report to the police that this has happened to me, and you meet probably somebody who will laugh at you, you know, or shame you. You know, this is how you were dressed when you were being raped, then you really deserve to have been raped. Or so they victimize you. Or it could be the money has exchanged. So somebody has been caught, but they bail themselves out. And so that any other time you ever try to go back now and report, this person, you have no idea how much money they were ever paid. They'll never be caught.
That's true.
And nothing will ever be done. And so you remain a victim for life because nobody hears you. And you don't have anywhere else to go because the police would have been the place to go.
That's true.
You go to hospital, probably money is needed. And maybe some money was stolen from you, whatever you had was stolen from you. Or just that you are in poverty, whatever. And you're told before you pay, say, 500 shillings, nobody can attend to you, you can't see the doctor. And so the help that you could have received immediately is denied you. And you find women and men struggle so much to ever get help because the first places they ever report, and even children, the first places they ever report, either they are not believed or they are just abused. You know, by the way they are responded to. So it's very, very unfortunate. And I want to say that in terms of impact, you find that this person who has been abused, they go through several struggles. There could be the physical injury, or, you know, you get, there could be the physical, the psychological injury. Yeah. So in terms of physical, you'll find that maybe somebody has hurt you. Like say, for example, a child has been raped. The anatomy is destroyed for life.
Absolutely.
You know, in terms of functionality, they will always struggle to function the normal way. Whether it is sexually or even just using the toilet, you know, to just pass your urine or your stool. Because that has been destroyed. In any case, when there's force, even for an adult, there is injury that does occur.
Yeah.
And then you'll find that because of that trauma that you are inflicted, you will suffer physical ailments. Probably you'll have, you know, bowel problems, syndromes that, you know, are related to your reproductive, not reproductive, yes, reproductive system, but even the digestive system. Because of the heightened anxiety, you find that you have got an irritable bowel all the time. Yeah. And even headaches and, you know, pressure and all manner of illnesses. Then psychologically, you'll find you become, you know, what is the right word? Vigilant. Yes. You know, or you will have post-traumatic stress disorder, or you will have just panic attacks. You sleep and you wake up screaming. You know, and the people around you do not know what to do. Yeah. You know, probably you can't even talk and say what's going on, and you're just always, you know, in panic mode. Or you could end up being very suicidal. Or destructive in your behavior. Yeah. People who have been sexually violated, cut, you know, and continually just inflict on themselves. The psychology behind that is that when you cut, the physical pain that you experience somehow helps to give the psychological pain. It gives a relief to the psychological pain. Yeah, it gives a relief. Okay. Because it's like you refocus the pain from the psychological to the physical. I see. And because you're so desperate to get rid of that torture, then you'd rather feel this pain and deal with this pain. Yeah. And so they cut. This person will be suicidal, so they will look for ways to kill themselves. I once worked with a client who said that I drive recklessly. And she was abused as a young girl by a house girl. She herself is a girl, was abused by a house girl because the house girl touched her inappropriately and continued to do so. And she was isolated of 4 girls. She was isolated, and so she really was a victim because she never could tell why were the other girls not picked on. And probably it's because maybe she was much more friendlier, and therefore the house girl took advantage of the fact that she was friendlier to her and will not tell on her. And so you find that somebody becomes very destructive, and that's the reason why victims end up being abusers. Yes. It's because they are looking for a way to deal with their pain and to gain control once again.
Okay. All right, we need to take a break right now, but of course when we come back, because you mentioned now trust is a big issue, like who do you trust, and all these, you know, institutions that you think you might find help sometimes might not be very helpful. There's some who are really, really good, you know, take you in, try to assist you as much as they can. So then who do you talk to? You know, who do you go to, and what are the steps? And of course, also the question of shelters. Do we have enough in the country to just offer, you know, shelter to these persons who've been sexually abused, and of course, life after the abuse as well. So of course, still a lot to talk about. Stay with us. This is Your World. We're coming back very shortly.
You've been searching for a solution for your stubborn dark marks. So have we. Nivea Lumina 630. With breakthrough patented ingredient Lumina 630, visibly reduces stubborn dark marks accumulated over 10 years in 4 weeks. Nivea Lumina 630, our ultimate solution for even and luminous skin. our global presence, we offer world-class banking services. We support SMEs through the Tony Elumelu Entrepreneurship Program by providing 5,000 USD seed capital and capacity building to young entrepreneurs. Apply today at www.tafconnect.net and visit any UBA bank branch to open an account today.
On this episode of Famani, a business that was brought to birth after Jackie losing her job.
This actually happened after I lost my job in 2017, and then this was actually just before the elections happened. Well, I did try to apply for jobs and it was not easy because of the election period. And I actually tried to think of different businesses that I would try to do.
And as simple as her services may seem to be,
so I thought about laundry, and like I could say, it has not been easy, but because it's something that I'm passionate about, during the difficult times, it makes it easier to push through.
Laundry Lady is the business we focus on this Thursday at 6:40 p.m. The Money, showcasing resilience and exploring scalability.
The First Lady.
You were never really prepared to have a child. I am tired of trying to keep you happy. All day long I worked so hard. I do tons of paperwork and I organized my whole day to fit in this appointment only for you to forget and not care how it affects me.
I'm so sorry, it was my fault.
Yes, everything was your fault, yes.
Federico, please calm down.
Not only do the two of you go gallivanting who knows where, but you also don't seem to mind how filthy she left her room.
Oh, I'm so sorry. We were in such a rush that I didn't get time to organize everything.
Well, go clean up the mess you made and then feel free to leave this house.
No, excuse me, but she's not leaving from here.
Get peace of mind and protect the ones you love with the power of Dettol Bar Soap. It cleans and protects from up to 100 illness-causing germs. So no matter what type of mum you are, trust Dettol.
Make this feel like this with a few sips of this. Get going with Go Fruit Juice, now available in 500 ml on the Go packs.
Right, welcome back. Exactly 27 minutes past the hour. Time really flies, all right? And of course, the conversation today is all about sexual violence. And the question that we're asking you is, why are we seeing an increase in the number of sexual violence or in sexual violence cases? So keep tweeting at NTV Kenya at Lubembe_Winnie. We'll be going through your feedback. But before that, let's answer a caller. Fred from Kasarani. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for calling us, Fred. Do you have a question or do you have a comment?
I just have a comment.
All right, go ahead.
Yes. Yeah, when it comes to sexual gender-based violence, the society also contributes a lot. In essence, that you'll find that majority of the families or people who are being raised by single parents, you'll find that when a mother has the children, she will instill the sense that men are bad, right? And vice versa to even men, that your mom is bad. But we forget that affects the psychology of a child. So this child develops the knowing that either men or women are bad. And you'll find that majority of these people who are being raised by single parents, they end up having that mind that at the end of the day, the other gender that is not, that didn't stand with my parents, is the one that is bad.
Okay.
And you'll find that it goes to an extent that even when you are socializing outside there, people who have been raised by single parents, the society tends to segregate them. Even when it comes to admission of school, you'll find that you are a single parent, we cannot accept you. We cannot accept your child, right? Or where is the mother, you know? Where is the father?
Okay.
So at the end of the day, plays a bigger role. That's one. Two, we have also to encourage people that it's normal and it's okay for men and women to coexist in a very healthy environment. In essence, by that I mean that you will find that majority of the society right now, or the society, stands with the girl child that supports these ladies, support ladies. But at the same time, they are forgetting that the boy child is there growing and is growing. So at the end of the day, you will find that in the next generation that is coming, you will find that more women will be empowered than boys. They know these are women who did again. A boy can afford for himself, he can fight and do everything for himself. Not forgetting that when this guy or this boy is growing, he needs support and mentor and guidance. At the end of the day, this guy grows up being wild, right? Knowing that I have to fight to get something.
Okay.
Ni lazima nitumie mabavu.
Nipate whatever I want. All right. Okay, thank you very much, Fred. And even the president himself just recently, when addressing the border, given the incidents, that happened, two actually incidences that involved the border, he said, listen, you don't really have to use force, and of course, that is what we're talking about today, like what you're saying, learn to coexist in a respectful and in a healthy manner that is between men and women, but also not just think that it's a woman's issue, but it's also, a men's issue at the same time. So thank you very much, Fred, for calling and, of course, just chiming into the conversation of the day. So I can see our time is far much spent, right? And probably someone might be watching us right now, probably might be going through the same and thinking, so who do I go to? Who do I talk to? And what do I do? And especially immediately after a case of sexual violence. So do you want to take that, Maureen, very quickly?
Yes. One thing we also need to tell people who've gone through sexual violence is your body stores the trauma, as Laz said, and there are three major reactions that you will have psychologically. It's either to fight, where you have the cutting and the physical aggression, or you have flight, where you just disassociated, you deny that ever happened, and you try and distract yourself. And then as a way of disassociating also, you have now when depression kicks in, and then the suicidal, you just want to forget and to get away from it all.
That's true.
And feeling unsafe in your own skin. Because sexual violence does not happen, you will associate it with a place, but also with your body, because it has been perpetrated against you. Okay, so we also have to say this is normal, because trauma is defined as a normal reaction to an abnormal event.
Okay.
So when you're going through this, you come and ask yourself, has everyone who's gone through sexual violence experienced what I'm experiencing? And the answer we are telling you is yes. It is normal that you will experience these feelings. But now, you can reach out. First thing that happens when you encounter sexual violence is speak about it. Because sexual violence thrives in actually all GBV. It thrives in silence and secrecy and shame. We can't talk about these things. We can't say that man in the community is the one who did this. We respect him. You will ruin a man's life. You'll ruin that woman's career when you say they did this. We also need to talk about it. Let's talk about it the same way we talk about tax, the same way we're talking about debt, the same way we're talking about elections.
Fuel.
Let's keep on. Fuel.
Yes.
The way you're tweeting about fuel and hashtag lower food prices. Talk about GBV the same way. We also have to realize, as adults in the community, it is our responsibility to protect the children.
That's true.
Even if it is not your own child. When you see a child uncomfortable walking with someone, or they look like they want to run, or they create even a commotion in a matatu, ask, what's going on? What's happening? You might be the only person who will intervene and help.
That's true, and save a child's life.
Yeah.
That's absolutely true. So speak up. Speak up is the first thing, all right?
So,
and then, yes.
So that said, then you reach out. If you are able to go to the police station on your own, you can go and report, or you can go accompanied by someone. It's always better if you have someone who can accompany you and help you with the process, because like the caller who called in, it's such a tedious process with the judiciary. A case can take 2 years, a case can take, and it's sad. It's just sad that is the state. That you get a child who was defiled at 10, the judgment and the ruling is being delivered when they're 13. They've had to go in and out of court and go through this whole process. And it's one of the reasons why we hardly ever have completion of such cases. You see, and even if you compare the numbers of court cases in concerning sexual violence and the reports, there's a very big disparity. And you ask yourself, these people in between here, this difference, where did they go? And how does it end up that they're survivors again, as what Leah is saying? You see, so we also need to address that. But you go report, and then you reach out to organizations that work in GBV. Usikime works in GBV. You can reach out to us on Facebook. You can call our call center 0800 000 999, and we'll be able to work with you. We offer psychosocial support, because what I talked about, the psychological effect of trauma, and what also Leah talked about, is it's not going to go away in a day or in one session.
It takes time.
You know, it takes a lot of time.
Journey.
And when it is addressed, it's when now what Leah was explaining, that trauma is stored in the body. And it starts showing in things. You will be tested for everything.
Absolutely.
You
I
know,
mean, we had a guy, you know, still on the show, who was sodomized multiple times. And he said, got to a point where, number one, he detested marriage, detested that, you know, thoughts about intercourse, you know, he really, and it affected him so much that it was just sad, you know, to hear his story. But like what you said, there's always help. So reach out and talk to someone. But Elizabeth, there's also that question of misreporting or underreporting, where a lot of cases go unreported, right? And the question is then, how do we get to these cases, you know, that have not been reported, where someone is just suffering in silence, right? How do we get to these cases and just make sure that they report or get help, you know, at the very least?
Okay, true. There are so many cases that go unreported. Like the percentage is very high. Like Maureen spoke before, you know, these are cases that happen within households normally. It is a cousin who violated a child. It is an uncle. But now, after treatment, yes, they come to us. They come to Nairobi Women's Hospital. They get treated sometimes. But then, after treatment, they won't report these cases.
Okay.
The reason being, it is a relative. What will I tell my other relative? Well, what will I say to the extended family that I went and reported a family member? What will I tell them? And for those, especially mothers, I love the way the mothers become passionate about their children. For those who stand for their children, they also end up suffering. But because right now we have real case scenarios of mothers running away with their children because they were raped by cousins, and now because she wants to pursue the case, the family is against her.
That's
and
true.
she has to.
She can't do it.
She has to run away and just keep hiding. And it is so sad because these children, some of them are already pregnant. Like this child, because they trusted the cousin, they did not come out. And these are the cases that come late. They come as late presentation. They come out, especially the adolescent girls. They come out when they're already pregnant. You know, this is the time now they can't handle it on their own. They have to tell their moms that this actually happened to me. So it is a very unfortunate state that it keeps happening. And for those who don't get pregnant, they just keep silent. And they end up being traumatized like the whole of their life. And after sexual violence, life is never the same.
It's true. It's never
like
the same.
Maureen and Leah said, the anatomy changes completely. Like you become a totally different person. The way you think, the way you feel, and you just cautious about the environment, about the people you're talking to. And especially when you don't go through psychosocial support, when you don't go through counseling, now it's very difficult to deal with it.
Move on,
Yeah, because probably you have no one to talk to. Probably you fear your own parents. You can't talk to them about it. You're just keeping it to yourself. And it becomes so, some people live with it like all their life. And they live hating the other gender, especially those who are gendered and perpetrated against them.
That's
and this
true.
is both for boys and girls.
And girls as well, that's true.
And it's even more difficult for a boy child to come out and speak about it. Yeah, so it happens a lot.
That's true.
And even for men, men who go through sexual violence don't easily report. So like we have 10% of men coming to report for a whole year. This is men and boys coming out to report. And they just came to the hospital and received this treatment and counseling.
And just
we do normally have support groups that run for a period of 10 months.
Okay.
So we work with them. We meet once a month. We work with them through this period. And by the time the 10 months are over, some of them are healed, but unfortunately some are not.
Yeah.
So it's a case by case
basis. Yes, it's a journey. Yeah, it's not one day you're not okay, then the next day you're okay. All right. So then do we encourage, I don't know, the society, because like we said when we started the show, the way we were socialized is like we have normalized some of those things. So is it a case of then we need to unlearn some of those things to make it easier for people to just come out and report, you know? Or what else, or how else can we encourage people to report, especially men and boys who have been sexually abused?
Yes, we know that to them it's a bit of a challenge. So we encourage them. Like right now we have a toll-free number for Gender Violence Recovery Center, 0800 327 65. And we also have Facebook. We also have other like Twitter handle. Where we encourage people to come out and report these cases.
All right.
Like Maureen said, just the same way we are talking about fuel, the same way we're talking about maybe food, should be the same way we talk about gender-based violence. It is very important
to report these
cases.
About it. All right. And then again, so for Leah, in terms of shelters, number one, do we have enough shelters in the country to accommodate persons who've been not only sexually abused, but just gone through any form of violence? And if so, at the shelter, then what kind of support should be given? And I know this is mostly for Maureen and, and Elizabeth, but I'll just ask in terms of the shelters, do you think we have enough, and how do we protect persons who have been sexually violated?
Yeah, certainly they can answer that question in addition. But I want to start first and foremost by talking about the awareness aspect. As I mentioned, I'm a clergy and work therefore in church. And being a counselor, I have made it my business then to be the one to raise awareness.
That's true.
And so I'm encouraging people out there who are aware, who are skilled in this area like I am, wherever it is you are, where you're working, make it your business. Be passionate about it, because unless we who are professionals in this area raise awareness, then it's going to continue to be the same story that people are afraid to come out and talk about. So I'll talk about it in the pulpit. I'll talk to parents on the pulpit and tell them, be kind to your children, respect your children. I'll talk about it in my sermons. I'll talk about it to children because I handle children, in charge of children. And so I'll talk to children about it. If somebody is treating you unfairly at home, maybe mommy is shouting at you or daddy is shouting at you, please come talk to me, because I want to hear whether there is more.
Yes.
Yeah, the interpretation of this shouting or conflict, what else could be going on?
Yeah.
I talk about, matters, mental health with children. I'm not afraid because I am aware, I'm in that space.
Yes,
unlike maybe probably other people out there who are working with children, they never think that they need to talk about mental health. Me, I talk about mental health with children because I want children to know that they have a safe place where when they come to church, they can come to us and we will support them and we'll help them. But I want to say, I don't think the proportion of the abuse is equal to the help that is out there and the shelters for that matter.
That's true, yeah.
So that if we are just saying even at the reporting space, there is so much stigma, how much more? Who will even show you where the shelter is?
That's true.
Because those are the people who need to have that information. You see, the common person doesn't know where the shelters are. So the place that you should be able to get help from, like for example, if it's a child, would be your mother or your caregiver. but probably they already start shaming you. So how do they even go looking for help from you? And I'm not saying every parent does that.
No.
I'm just encouraging those that do that, that please know that this is more harmful than helpful. Yeah, so the point then being, we need to raise awareness about the shelters. The people who are the recipients, like she works in Nairobi Women's.
Yeah.
Those are the people then who would have these shelter numbers and can be able to propose the same to the people who come to them. The same with her, so that already, and me too, who works in church, so that already when I notice that there's something that's not going on well, then I have a contact person who I can talk to and say, can you facilitate a place for hiding for this person, for this family, a mother probably and her children. Yeah. So they are not enough, but we are glad there's something that's being done and that there's something.
Yes. We need to make sure that we have more, you know, moving forward. And Maureen, in terms of then the shelters, number one is how do you protect, you know, the victims? And number two, do we have instances where some would come, right, get help, and then think, you know what, I'm okay, and I want to forgive this person, and I forgive them, I want to go back, you know, to this person who abused me in the first place. What is that process like?
One thing we need to realize is in Kenya we have very good policies, but policies that are not implemented is as good as
not
a
having a
paper
policy
that
at
you
all.
can't read, you know, because we have very good policies in place. We have funding from the government and even the international community for shelters, but it doesn't reach the shelters. You know, that is one of the challenges we have, because shelters are there. One, they're not enough, like what Leah said. The support is not enough for the need that is there currently, you know. But even when it comes to the idea of, there's a conversation that is going on that they're going to close children homes, you know. What happens to this child who was violated and the parent is also vulnerable? Where is the safe space for them going to be? Because even when we make these decisions, let's look at the overall impact of it, you know, because that was the idea of having the homes and, you know, everything else. It's the same way I'm saying we have the policy, but the implementation is where the big problem is. But what you've talked about is, it's called trauma bonding, because you are bonded to your abuser. You can find someone who gets to a place where they decide, I can forgive this person, you know, with or without prompting. The idea that the society is going to shun them and all that is a minimal to why they make the decision personally to go back. Even when you talk about economy and all that, you know, it's minimal. It's that trauma bonding, because trauma bonding comes when there is abuse and then reinforcement. Because abusers are not bad every day. They'll tell you, Bonangu Simba, it's just when he drinks or when he's stressed or when he's, you know, even when it comes to child, that's not even how child are abused. They're given a gift in secret. They're given that one thing they know their mother does not allow them to do. If it's either sweets or it's playing games or it's watching pornography, and then they're told, you know, if mom knows, you'll be punished, you'll be in trouble. So there's always a secret between the child and the abuser, you know, before it even gets to the threat. So let's talk about these things and tell the children, this is the process. Don't tell them that if someone just comes and touches you, hardly will the abuser ever come and touch them. Just tell them if someone approaches you and tells you something that you should not be doing, be wary of them.
Okay. So if they want to go back, what happens then? Do you offer maybe counseling to the perpetrator if they want to come in and just, you know, talk about it? Or at some point, and especially if it's a case of a child, at some point they will just have to go back home, right? So then what happens? What is that process like before they are reintegrated into the society from the shelters?
We've had instances where children have been removed from the family because the mother is married to the perpetrator and has refused to leave that home. Because what we say, and I know the children's department uses that statement, is what is in the best interest of the child. Of course, the family setup is the best interest. But if this setup is where the abuser is, then it stops being the best interest, you know. Then we have to look for a safe space for this child. That's why, for me, it's a very fearful thought to think, what happens when we close these homes? Because like us, we're not a children's home. We cannot take in a child without the mother. So what happens when the child is a survivor and the mother has refused to leave this home? You know,
Yeah.
that is a very scary thought to think about.
Yeah.
But the times where the woman is the survivor and they decide they want to go back, because part of the therapy that we offer at Usikimye is trauma therapy, because you have to break that trauma bond and show them this is not love you're feeling for this person.
No.
You're actually bonded because of the abuse and then the reinforcement. Because most of the time, even with physical assault, they are beaten and then they're given presents and then they're told, you'll be saying you want that biashara.
Yeah.
You know, you go look for a shop and then the next day they're beaten and they're told, hata tukuongelelea ile maneno. You know, what did you want? You wanted a dress. You wanted this. Because it's abuse and then reinforcement. So it becomes very confusing for the survivor if they do not understand that this is actually not a good person.
Yeah.
You know, it's like being beaten and then you blow.
Yeah.
It's being pinched and then you do pole. You know, understanding that abusive part of this person has not stopped.
Okay.
The idea that the church and the religious institutions need to come in and need to have trauma counselors in their institutions. And I love what Leah is doing. They need to come in and say, these things are happening. And it is okay for guys to separate, to divorce, if there's not going to be
any solution in between.
It doesn't always have to be amicably resolved.
Okay, all right.
Yes,
because
we
it
also
might
have
continue,
to have
right?
that conversation.
That's
but it doesn't
true.
always have to be reconciliation. Sometimes
you just
there
have
is
to
no
go.
change, and the kids also need to grow up in a good environment and a safe environment. And that is why we're informing this cycle.
Okay.
Because if I saw it happen to my mother, and my mother saw it happen to her own mother,
The
and then my
cycle
daughter sees
continues.
it happening to me and hears, it happened to mom, it happened to Shosh, then maybe
It
this
will
is
continue.
how
It will
is.
continue.
Yeah.
And now that we're heading into the election, and of course, period, and according to Kenya National Commission for Human Rights, again in 2007, 2008, and of course in 2017, also saw a really, really good number, as far as cases of gender-based violence, and of course sexual violence being one of the cases that were really, really on the rise. And I'm just concerned that right now that we're heading into the election, and Elizabeth, I want you to take this. Again, what are some of the measures that you would want put in place just to make sure that we have an election that is peaceful, number one, and that if anything happens, we don't really see a rise in cases of sexual violence? Because amongst the cases, 54.5% was actually documented to be perpetrated by the policeman. All right.
Yeah.
So then what do we do to make sure that we do not have such cases happening in the CS general election?
For that, awareness creation is a very important aspect in ensuring that violence doesn't happen again.
All right.
And for us, we have a branch. We have a department that works in prevention. And we work with schools, we work with the community, and we continually create awareness to the community, just to ensure that cases of sexual violence don't continue. And this is also through the IC material and the social media, and also just to put in place the measures for response.
Yeah.
Because as much as we are creating awareness to prevent that the cases from happening, we also need to know that it is inevitable that some people will actually experience violence.
Yeah.
So we are just putting measures in place to make sure that we are ready for response.
All right. More for you is more of response. Okay. Literally have like 1 minute 30 seconds to go. Okay. So Leah, I'd want you to chime in on the same and then just talk about life after violence, right? The healing process. Can you do that in like 5 seconds?
Let me try. I want to start by saying that we live in a broken world, a sinful world, and when sin entered the world, immediately there was shame that was associated to it. And so what those victims go through, feeling ashamed and feeling guilty and all that, is the way we are made, that we are not supposed to experience that kind of violence or that kind of thing happening to us. That's why we end up feeling ashamed and feeling like we are worthless. But there is hope, because there is a God in heaven who cares and who feels with you. And I want to encourage those that are victims that the first place you start is speak out. I think Maureen had already talked about that. That please don't be quiet about what's going on. Talk to somebody who you trust. Go to a counselor. Let me tell you that there are free counseling places. I once worked in a NPC Valley Road as a therapist. And I can tell you there, you just walk in, you'll find professionals and they'll support you. Also, where I'm working currently, we are trying to come up with a center for counseling. And so I encourage you, just go and talk about it. Maybe first and foremost in a safe environment, but secondly, probably then it becomes your mission after that, that you can talk about to educate others and to help others to come out of that thing.
That's true.
So that you don't have to be stuck as a victim.
Yes, in that stage. All right, and Maureen, literally 20 seconds.
I want to talk about sexual violence in elections. Because we have these trainings, and they always get the senior officers who come for the training. But the guys who go to the field are the junior officers.
All right.
Can we have training against sexual violence for it to be ingrained in them? Because you get a police station has one gender officer. So what happens when they go to the ground? You know, and what is the structure when it comes to reporting? Because the worst cases that we handle are cases that involve security agents. Because they're the hardest. Like we said, power dynamic.
That's true.
So what is their structure like? And are they accessible to the common mwananchi? And how can we strengthen that?
All right,
strengthen and finally, the team. Let's speak up. Let's speak up against
that.
GBV.
Yes, please, let's speak up. And of course, based on the conversation that we had today, very, very necessary to talk about it. So we hope that the conversation keeps going on, especially on our socials. That is at NTV Kenya, at Lubembe_Winnie. But we have to close it here. So thank you very much, ladies, for this very, very insightful conversation today. And thank you for watching. And I hope that you've learned a lot from today's episode. But message, that his takeaway message is, please speak up, okay? So my name is Winnie Lubembe. God bless. See you tomorrow morning, same time, same place. But until then, remember to stay safe and see you soon. Goodbye for now.